So Ed, obviously, thanks very much for making the time. And when we were chatting before, and doing a little bit of research on your background, fascinating background, submariner in the Royal Navy, and then you were in the Foreign Office, and then you went and started one of the people who started Fig Leaves. And one of my interesting observations in chatting to a number of entrepreneurs over the past few years is that individuals' background seems to have a huge impact on their kind of entrepreneurial journey and how they approach their business and how they grow. As an opening, could you just give a view of how you think your background, sort of the non-startup background, if you like, has impacted how you approach starting your businesses and maybe starting Quill, if you like?
So I guess sometimes these things only become apparent to yourself after the event.
Sure, absolutely.
And that's definitely the case with me, because I never planned to be an entrepreneur. In fact, I probably didn't really know what an entrepreneur was until quite sort of late in the journey.
Right.
But I think one of the things that has been a pattern for me is I've always been very counter the sort of group think. If I look back, so my dad always taught me to go and do my own thing. My dad set up his own business. My dad sort of is from the East End of London, built his own business up, and
Right.
he was always, Ed, you're on your own, be independent. So I joined the Navy from school at 17 and a half, so that was the first thing.
Wow, okay.
Went sort of way off piste versus the bulk of my.
So you were on submarines at 17 and a half?
So I didn't actually go into. I went in as a seaman officer.
Okay.
Was then seconded to the US 6th Fleet in the Middle East, but
right.
Didn't go into submarines because I went off. Then got a place at Cambridge. Went off to university, sponsored by the Navy. Then went back in. It was the first Gulf War, and in the context of that, I had the opportunity to then apply and go through the selection process to go into the Foreign Office, which I then went and did.
Right.
So I joined the Navy, I think, because I wanted to do something challenging. I had a friend in the Navy. I thought that would be a really exciting next step. I was never thought about my journey as what's this going to look like on my resume.
Yeah.
And as I was part way through, very early on, even during the Navy journey, and then I had an opportunity to go and apply for this selection process to go into the Foreign Office, which I did.
Yeah.
Again, it was quite a big sort of veering off to the right.
Yeah.
Got through the selection and spent 8 years working in the security and counter-terrorism field. And I would absolutely do all of that again in a heartbeat.
Fantastic.
But I would also leave again because in 2000, sort of 99, 2000, when the whole internet thing was kicking off, I was ready for a move. I'd had 8 really exciting years in that period.
Yeah.
But another friend of mine was going into the internet space, and then we teamed up, and that was the sort of start of the journey for me. That was to become figleads.com, which was another sort of veering off. So most people stay in the sort of Foreign Office sort of for full career through to pension. But I looked ahead and thought, no, I want another challenge. I want to do something completely different.
Yeah.
So I think that for me has been the theme.
Did you find things like, I mean, maybe the obvious thing, but like resilience, if you're kind of in the Navy, Foreign Office, etc., those sort of things that helped you during those ups and downs in the business?
Yeah,
journey?
for sure. Look, as you well know, very fast learning curve in the early days of building Fig Leaves around, SEO, how do you get to number 1 on Google, email marketing, all that sort of thing is incredibly valuable, but ultimately it comes down to leadership and people.
Yeah.
The skills that I learned through the journey with the forces and within the context of what I was doing within the Foreign Office around building really motivated teams and leading them, sometimes in very high pressure situations, was by far the most useful skill that I took out of that period.
The softer people skills.
Yeah, and I think a real fundamental belief and appreciation of the importance of culture.
Yeah.
I took a lot of that out of that early period,
right.
Say in the forces and Foreign Office, and that's been incredibly helpful, I think, in a business context.
And have you had to sort of, because I guess in the military there's a bit of, I don't know, command and control or directional, and I guess in a situation where everyone's lives are under threat, people pretty much do what they're told to a certain extent. I think that's from a very naive position on my part. Have you had to change the way you lead, etc., where you're leading a team of people where they haven't signed up to the forces and
look, I totally get the question, but it's a really, I think the answer might surprise you.
Oh, please.
If you're putting yourself in a position where you're responsible for other people's lives, clearly the number of stripes you got on your arm counts for something, but ultimately it still comes down to personal leadership. You're asking people to take extreme personal risk, and people really only do that willingly. Obviously they will follow orders, but really they're following you because you're a strong leader and they believe in you, and they will go through with you to the very end if that's what it takes. So it does come down ultimately to personal leadership and the impact you can have on a group of people.
So it's the same.
It is the same. Obviously, the context in a business context, you can't be as directive, but I think the skill of motivating and leading people and presenting them a vision which they believe in and believe that you would lead from the front, I think that is as effective in the business environment as it is in a military context.
Right. So the Royal Navy will love this as their recruitment.
I think there's lots of relevant skills. I mean, some people, that's not to say that everybody that goes into the forces is well designed to go and build a business. I think, some people have told me I've got some DNA missing because I have this, I'm not a crazy risk taker, but I love climbing. I like doing sort of extreme sports. There's a bit of me that's got that. And obviously to go and build a business from scratch, you're taking a calculated risk.
Yeah, you're managing the risks.
And a lot of people that go into government service don't have quite that level of risk appetite. But some do, and I think that coupled with the leadership training that you get in that context is a really powerful combination. Yeah,
fascinating. Thank you. Moving on then from that kind of entrepreneurship part, but into the world of content where you are now, as I guess content has lots of different meanings. So if you ask me about content, I'd probably bore you about user-generated content, customer reviews, etc. If you ask a retailer, they might talk about product descriptions. If you ask a publisher, they might talk about articles, features, etc. How do you think about content when you're and particularly from a sort of Quill perspective?
Yeah. So look, one of the amazing things about the Quill journey has been the timing of our launch into the market with the emergence of content marketing. I think an awareness that content fundamentally is such an authentic way of engaging with consumers, and I think the market has really begun to realise and understand that over the course of the last few years. But exactly as you said, ask 10 people what they mean by the word word content, and you'll get 10 very different answers. And so whilst we've been riding that wave, it is also a challenge, and we've actually spent some time thinking about whether there is a better word than the word content, because I say it's got such a disparate range of uses. The way we look at it, and we've tried to bring some definition to how we see the content landscape. And the way we do that is we look at it through the prism of the purchase funnel. So you've got consumers. So consumer first. Consumer first, Start with the consumer, and consumers moving from awareness into consideration and conversion. And 99% of the time, when people talk about content, they're talking about the awareness layer of content, what we would say is hero content, which is very, very well served by some amazing creative agencies, ad agencies. There's a lot of activity up there. And that gets, in our experience, all of the airtime. That's where you get the awards at Cannes and so on and so on. We believe, coming out of e-commerce, that whilst that's not unimportant, it is not the critical layer of content. The critical layer from an e-commerce perspective is the layer of content that sits exactly before the customer puts their credit card details in. So on a retail site, it would be the product description or the category description, the buying guides. On a travel site, it might be the hotel review or the destination guide, etc., etc. We call that layer the primary content layer. Driving conversion, so moving browsers who are looking for products and helping them make a purchase decision. And that's why we built Quill, because what became apparent from the Fig Leaves journey, and sort of other companies I've worked with along the way as well in the e-commerce space, is that what consumers are missing online is the equivalent of the shop assistant to help them make an informed decision from what sometimes is an overwhelming choice of products. And that can only be done online through effective content, so what we call primary content. So we specialize in that, and that's how we see the content landscape. And our view is you have to fix your primary content first if you're an e-commerce business, and then work up the funnel. Because if you're investing here first, and we see this time and time again, you're driving consumers through to a page, a product page or a category page, that's just not optimal, and so you lose the value of all that investment you've made in marketing terms, not just content, but across the board in marketing terms, further up the funnel.
And do you find you have to then work with the people who are setting the kind of hero content agenda, the agencies, etc.? And sort of, do they try and squeeze you out of the picture? Do they see you as a sort of as a friend?
We absolutely see that the need for that content journey through the funnel to be integrated, and quite often we're working alongside another agency or an in-house team to ensure that it is integrated. But our experience is the content that's being produced or needs to be produced at the bottom of the funnel is something that these guys neither want to do or can do. It's a very, very operational problem that we're solving. Hundreds of thousands of product descriptions, hundreds of different types of shoe, for example, for a particular fashion retailer maybe that we're working with. That's not the same as the campaign-based content that sits up here. And our experience, the people that love doing this don't want to do this.
And so you do the product descriptions as well, do you?
Yeah, the product descriptions, the category descriptions. So it'd be these Jimmy Choo shoes or these different Jimmy Choo shoes. And then the category level would be black shoes, high heel shoes, buying guides, get the look guides. I'm being very sort of fashion centric because a lot of our clients are in fashion. Buying guides, video guides, shoppable video.
So the sort of shopping I remember speaking to shopping.com probably about 8 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago now, and they'd had a small army of people. I think they had it in India where they had 500 people who dealt with all their product descriptions because they didn't believe the retailers had quality enough. So so you're effectively, that's a layer you will now provide to
absolutely. We provide a fully merged, fully managed plug-in solution where we will look after, for some of our clients, their entire primary content layer. So all of the product descriptions that are going live on their site, the category descriptions that go with them, we'll be producing for them at a speed that's typically twice as fast, about half the price, in their tone of voice. And I think one of the things I'm most proud of about Quill, apart from the cultural piece we spoke about earlier, is the fact that we've now developed a methodology that allows us to consistently replicate a tone of voice.
So how do you do that? Because that tone of voice is because I wanted to come on and talk about trust, and I guess trust and tone of voice start to tie in. But how do you manage the tone of voice?
We have a process that we go through with every client. It's quite a detailed briefing process that codifies what their tone of voice looks like in black and white. I mean, down to a very granular level of detail.
Do they always know what their tone of voice is?
No, they don't. So in some cases, some of the clients we're working with have very, very clearly defined tones of voice and they're properly codified in-house. That's obviously a nice head start. They give you a
Bible about that thick.
I'd love it to be the case every time. The reality is it's not. Some of their code of voice or tone of voice guidelines rather are written but are actually not, to our level, are not detailed enough, and unfortunately there are many that don't have those codified at all. And I continue to be surprised, or we continue to be surprised at some pretty major brands will have the entire C level of the business agonizing over the Pantone color of the logo, but nowhere in the company has somebody set out in black and white what our tone of voice is, which is remarkable considering the explosion into market content and how we're talking with our customers. It's all through the written word and sort of video content. That has to have a tone of voice. So we won't start work with a client unless we have that to a place that is workable, because we're then creating virtual teams within our network, which could be 2 people or 200 people, who we will then train on that tone of voice, and we will train them to a point where they'll produce samples, the client will sign off on those samples, and only then do we then go into production.
Right, and are you selling, it's interesting because you're obviously getting into tone of voice, and that's getting into sort of CMO's territory, Chief Marketing Officer's territory. Are you selling into the marketing side of the business, or are you selling into the e-commerce side of the business?
It does vary by client. With some clients we're working with the marketing team. Sometimes it's the e-commerce team, digital team, SEO team. Sometimes it might be with the content team. I mean, one of the challenges we have as a business and as an industry is that, I mean, remarkably, we're 2 decades into the internet now, or properly into internet retail, but ownership of primary content is all over the place. And in some businesses we're seeing it owned sort of very clearly by a director of e-commerce, but in other businesses, and again some big brands we're working with, it's sort of sidelined somewhere in merchandising, with no one quality controlling the product descriptions that are being pushed through to the website from multiple suppliers in different tones of voice. So one of our challenges when we're presenting Quill to these sorts of companies is sometimes to figure out who owns it and how is that content being produced today, because the hero content normally has a very defined sort of location in the organizational structure, but the primary content we found can be all over the place.
So you have to do a bit of navigating internally.
And that unfortunately is a bit of a sad reflection of the level of importance, or sometimes lack of importance, that these companies are giving to it. And we will show them some data. We've got so much data on this now that if you get this right, the value, the ROI value of fixing your primary content, moving a product page conversion rate from a substandard 0.5% to an industry standard of 2 or 3%, I mean, you're talking potentially tens of millions of pounds of incremental revenue by fixing maybe 500 to 1,000 pages.
So it's almost fixing the boring stuff that they'd almost rather be doing something something more. So just as you were talking, so where's Amazon on the scale of primary content?
Well, I don't want to pick on Amazon, but as an example.
Yeah, I don't need to know whether they're clients or not, but how do you, if you look at a page of Amazon or whatever, how do you see Amazon as primary in terms of primary content? If we look at all of the marketplace businesses that are out there, we're actually massive. Amazon is an amazing business, and we would also say that we're really big believers in the marketplace model, sort of beyond Amazon. But the problem that marketplaces have is that they're being pumped full with product content from a huge range of different sources, which is not written in a consistent tone of voice, which is often not very well written, fields missing, spelling mistakes. Sometimes we see sort of HTML code showing, etc. And ultimately, it becomes a massive operational challenge to stay on top for the marketplaces, to stay on top of the quality of their products, their product content on site, much more so than it is, say, for a singular Bond Street brand. So we see the marketplace as an area which really does need to raise its game from a primary content point of view to maximize the conversion rates and the revenues both for the suppliers and for the marketplaces themselves. Do you think?
The second issue, one other thing very quickly. The second issue they've got, again, which is endemic, is as the web and e-commerce proliferate, is this explosion of duplicate content.
Yeah.
So the same product description being pushed through to Amazon is being pushed out via data feeds to hundreds and hundreds of other websites. Google is looking at those pages and saying, well, hang on, you guys can't be bothered to produce any bespoke content on that product. Not only are we not going to index you, we're actually going to penalize your domain. Again, we see that emerging sort of quite a lot now in that space.
And some not even realizing it's happening.
Yeah.
And just sticking with that Amazon theme, if you take, I guess it's personal interest, if you take the view that maybe Amazon wins now because of its brand and the breadth of product, and yet if you look at a product page or you look at a category, look at Amazon, it doesn't feel the most intuitive. Maybe we're also familiar with it, and as you say, probably different levels of content, and there's certainly no buying guides on there in terms of other retailers, and so they may win on their brand, they may win on their delivery and just sheer scale and breadth of products. Do you then see that the way other retailers can then compete effectively with Amazon is by focusing on the content, focusing on buying guides, effectively changing the playing field?
Yeah. So we have produced, just at the product description level and the category, tens of thousands of product and category pages, just in fashion, but also in other areas, consumer electronics and so on. Based off that experience, we now have a very clear view of what a best-in-class product description and a category page needs to look like in terms of optimizing the conversion rate.
By vertical.
By vertical, and we're releasing it sort of progressively during the course of this year under the umbrella of the Quill Quality Score. That allows us to remotely benchmark different retail sites in the same category. And absolutely, there are some very, very effective product pages out there, which essentially employ content in a far more effective way than the bulk of the competitors in particular sectors. And some of this is not rocket science. And if you're in fashion, most people buying fashion would like some information around the fit of the product.
Yeah, completely. And it's just
statistically, when we do some analysis of product descriptions in the online fashion space, a very small number of online fashion retailers talk in clear terms around the fit of a particular item of clothing. And we know from our analysis that's a critical buying driver. So that's just as an example.
And there's a lot of the content. Maybe it's just the way the conversations flow, but it feels like a lot of your content is almost getting the basics right for retailers.
Yes.
But are you also doing a percentage around editorial type content of buying guides, etc., or is the bulk getting the basics right, product descriptions, fit and size?
So if you've got our purchase funnel here, the content landscape sits as an upright triangle next to it. So the massive layer, which is why we've we've built Quill and why we've configured it as is the wide base of that triangle. But absolutely, once you fix that, then you can start working up the content triangle into consideration content. So you then might start doing some. And it needs to be integrated, as we said earlier, but you can start moving into sort of better buying guides, sort of location, destination guides, better social content, but all of it integrated in a way that's driving people through to purchase. That's how we'd be thinking about it.
Interesting. I hadn't appreciated that. So that the bulk is, if you like, content. Well, your starting point is content to improve conversion, effectively.
Yes.
And then you move up into the world of content, more how people might traditionally think about content marketing, which is the higher parts of the funnel. Okay.
Another way of thinking about it, which again sounds a bit crass, but we see this more often than not. If you imagine going into a physical store where you can't touch the products, the labels on the shelves are full of spelling mistakes. The price is wrong. There's some code showing. They've got the wrong products in the wrong bit of the shelf. It's just not going to happen. So our contention is, why are you permitting that in an online environment when you never in a million years would allow that in store? And obviously the issue is, sometimes, we didn't know. Sometimes is we do know, but we don't have the resources to solve because there's just such a scale of issue. But that's our belief in this, and you've got to get that fixed first before you start moving up the funnel.
Okay. And clearly, I guess with product turnover and in travel and turnover, I guess new hotels coming on, it's a constant process. New products
this is like
in.
painting the time bridge. I mean, you know, you start at one end and you've got to start again. And so, you know, many of our clients, which is why, you know, a lot of our clients are in fashion. They've got very large inventories. Often across multiple categories, you know, kids wear, and they're changing, you know, seasonally, and particularly the clients who are in fast fashion, they might be releasing 200 to 400 new products a week. That all needs to be written, and then it needs to be translated into other languages if they're trying to expand outside the UK. So hence you get this sort of huge explosion in demands for primary content. And the reason we built the business is because I know from having been inside an e-commerce business, that is a very painful problem to try to solve. You know, try and pull in a couple of your PR team, happens one of our buyers can write. That's just not a scalable option.
And do you find that your conversation initially with your customers is more about, I don't know what you might describe as the secondary content, where they actually they sort of feel that what you might describe as the primary content, the conversion content is sorted, and they're actually initially engaging with you in the content marketing, wanting to make their sites more human, more human, more customer focused?
We would, it does happen sometimes, but I think most people now, because we're the only company in the market with this focus, I think when we engage with a client, sometimes we'll talk to a new prospect based off of having done a Quill quality score audit of the site. So I think most of the time we're talking to people about their primary content. Sometimes it'll get deflected up into a sort of consideration layer of content discussion, but in 90% of cases, the people we're talking to have got a primary content issue. I mean, I struggle to think of a major retail business that we're talking to that hasn't got a problem with its primary content. And I'm not suggesting that Quill is the right answer to every problem, because we're not. I mean, in some cases, actually, it might be more effective to have one copywriter or two copywriters, and we'd be overkill for that. But I think most companies are struggling with their primary content or are unaware of the extent of the problem.
And are you starting to look at, obviously the buzzword around there, but the more I dig into it, the more real it feels from the world of kind of AI, etc. Because I imagine at the moment you're using humans to do that primary content. Are you starting to explore how humans may be supplemented by whether it's machine learning or artificial intelligence in that space?
So we're sort of keeping a close eye on that. I mean, fundamentally, we are also a technology company. The way we apply technology, though, has been to look at the content creation process and identify the points in that process where the friction can be eliminated by the use of technology. So, for example, there are some things that an editor does that can be done to 100% level of accuracy through the use of software. There are some things in the workflow, so the allocation of work that can be done through technology. So the way we think about it, and we've come at this without any of the baggage sometimes of a traditional content creation process, we can challenge some of the sacred cows that sit in that process and say, actually, no, this can be done much more effectively through software. So I'd say, a slightly longer answer to your question, that's been our approach for the last few years, and the Quill Cloud platform that sits at the core of the business is what enables us to do this at the speed and scale we're able to do it. I do get nervous about the term AI. Often when we dig into companies say they're using AI, it tends to be a find replace function.
Oh, completely.
That's not our definition.
And it's probably more, I guess the question is more, are you preparing yourself for 3 or 4 or 5 years down the line rather than today?
Yes, no, absolutely. So I think that the last bit I would say is we're definitely keeping an eye on this, and I think as we go through this year, we're going to be increasingly looking at how our processes could use AI, machine learning, to effectively self-learn. So where do we see patterns in content emerging which can then be replicated, potentially around tone of voice? Obviously some aspects of this are quite well established in the translation area, but are there some other areas where we can progress that? But we've found a lot of low-hanging fruit before having had to
yeah,
get
no,
into the
you'll
world
have
of
it.
AI.
You'll kind of improve the efficiency, and then it's where you go next. And then
Just to give you, I mean, just to bring that alive, we have a core team based here in London, supported by a network of about 2,000 people.
Okay, around the world.
Around the world. Yeah. We've written 15 million words of content in the last 12 months.
Okay.
And that is only possible because of the platform that we've built within Quill.
Right, interesting. And I'm conscious of time, but moving up from the primary layer to that, what you might call consideration content, and what people might traditionally think is content marketing. It seems to me that brands and retailers have an insatiable demand for that content, that type of content, not least because consumers have the appetite to consume it. Are you and I guess one of the other sort of interesting trends is obviously digital advertising is taking a bigger share of advertising, but a lot of that's going to Facebook and Google, and then you've got a sort of, dare I say it, the quality of that advertising, digital advertising, from what I see, is almost going down and down. It's retargeting, some of it's borderlining on spam, and the providers would hate me for saying that. And then you have ad blocking coming in. Does that start, how does that start to impact your business when you see traditional advertising, ad blocking rising? So I don't know what ad blocking stats are now, 18% or something of people have done, or 28, either 18 or 28, I can't remember the exact number. We see that playing out across the board. We see our clients' consumers increasingly desensitized to poor quality advertising, too much of it, inappropriately positioned at the wrong point in the journey. I mean, obviously, the industry is getting, the ad part of the industry is getting better, but our sense that there is a macro theme playing out here. Actually, and I don't think this is just about advertising, I think it's relevant to all sorts of things in this era. I think people are looking for a more authentic basis for their engagement with brands. And that is increasingly not coming through advertising, it's coming through better quality content. And so our view is, yes, you've got all of those challenges around advertising, but actually there's a very positive dynamic emerging, which is around the authentic relationship between a brand and a consumer, which I think consumers are latching onto. And where we see this working really well, it's invariably because the brand has a really high quality content strategy, content marketing strategy to engage with their consumers. And the results speak for themselves. So absolutely, it is sort of further up the triangle. We see all of this. It needs to be integrated from the primary layer into the consideration layer and the hero content layer. But one of the drivers is this theme of authenticity. And my impression is brands are getting that more and more now. And then are you taking from budgets that might have been originally for advertising if you're doing that sort of consideration layer?
We're seeing marketing budgets being moved over, brand budgets being moved over into content creation. I can't remember the stats. I think there was a report out last year on, I think, the sort of CMOs, which talked about the extent to which ad budgets are now being moved over. And you can also see, if you look at the big sort of agencies and networks, the extent to which they're also shifting some of their resources from sort of ad, media buying, etc., into content creation and content distribution.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to sort of close out on a slightly lighter hearted bit, obviously you went out to the North Pole, something not many people do. Not many people do in their lives. Highlights and lowlights of that.
I guess the highlight is I got there.
And
the lowlight is it looks exactly the same as the point we started. It's 360 degree ice. It's a GPS coordinate.
Presumably there's a series of flags there, are there, when you're?
No, there's literally nothing. The only thing you can see are some sort of frozen ski tracks that come to a sort of a point in the ice.
There's nothing physical there.
There's absolutely nothing there.
That is a bit disappointing.
So I love mountains. So this is where I'm missing a bit of sort of DNA somewhere, because I I love that. I love the challenge of doing that.
Yeah.
But if you asked anyone in my team, did we enjoy the journey? I think you'd probably get a resounding no from all of us. We all love climbing mountains.
Yeah.
You get the exhilaration of getting to a peak and the view.
Yeah.
And there's something very real about climbing.
Yeah.
But this was very monotonous every day covering.
Psychological challenge.
Yeah, it's more psychological. Obviously, it's physically very demanding, but it is the monotony of 360 degree ice. The temperature is just brutally cold. I mean, I started getting frostbite on my right hand on the second or the third day. So you've got the cold to contend with, you've got the monotony to contend with. It's also the most densely populated area on the planet with polar bears.
Okay.
So you're completely layered up. You can't hear a thing. Goggles on, can't see very much. Goggles misting up. And one of you's got a sort of a Remington pump action shotgun. And the bears know to come and try to take the person on the back of the group. And they'll come from behind. So you have a polar bear watch. So you've got all of that to contend with. And you're going over sea ice.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't do it again.
Interesting.
Is the short answer.
Did you see polar bears while you were there?
No, but the team in front of us we had a satellite call in to Resolute Bay each day. I think the team ahead of us got attacked on, I think it was our second night. It was obviously 24-hour daylight. Second night out by 2 polar bears, which caused some.
So lesson is to be second in the second party in the group. I'm sure there's a lesson there for starting businesses as well. But,
you divide up the safety kit. One person carries the emergency beacon, another one carries the satellite phone, and the other person carries the shotgun. But the person at the back can't carry the shotgun because they're the person most likely to get hit by the bear.
Right.
So anyway, so you work it all out. That's a negotiation over the porridge at breakfast.
A great place to end. You don't want to be last in the queue.
No.
Thanks very much, Ed. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Richard.